All right, I know you're all sick of hearing about graphics cards and stuff, especially with how much of a show this particular launch is turning out to be from NVIDIA. So to hold us over until we have our AMD cards to kind of start testing, we'll look at some normal components and stuff that people might be interested in using for their computers. And this right here, we're a little late to the party, but late nonetheless, or arrived nonetheless. This is the LandCool 216, a case that actually got some praise out of Steve. So that right there should be the end of the video. There you go, guys. Steve likes it. Move on. Today's video is brought to you by the J2Sense merch store. We got t-shirts and gaming mats and mugs and all that kind of stuff. So whenever you go buy our stuff, we don't have to put other ads here and other annoying crap. So go buy our stuff. You know, for the record, I think one man is starting to have too much power in this industry, and I think it's time somebody do something about that. Maybe a mysterious package arrive in the mail or something. But anyway, moving forward, this is the LandCool 216. We've actually had some pretty good success with the LandCool products in the past, both small form factor, mid-tower, and this sort of builds upon that success. It doesn't carry the cost of like the Lee 011 Dynamic or Evo or anything like that. That's some thick cardboard. But it definitely carries the extreme cooling that you would expect, especially with today's high power components, both CPUs and GPUs, but it doesn't break the bank, which is one of the things that we love about the LandCool the LandCool lineup of cases from Lee. So the one we have here is the white edition. It's also an RGB case, which means it's got some lighting already pre-built into it. Okay, so as you can see, this is a fairly standard size chassis, which means a fair amount of, well, there's another old LandCool rig right here. You can see size-wise, it's a little bit wider in terms of depth. It's a little bit deeper. And so we might be able to actually fit a Strix card in there. I feel like that should be the latest, you know, will it fit a Strix? I think one of the things I love most about the Lee lineup of cases, especially the LandCool, is the fact that they don't really scrimp on the little things. For instance, you'll notice as I take the side panel off here, all the screws are just like, these are kind of a steel machined look to them. They don't have to go to this level of detail on the captive screws, but they do. So anyway, take the top off to access everything else. This is a design they kind of carried over from the 011, where the top panel comes off and then it kind of gives you, full access to the top. Side glass panel, I'm gonna leave the plastic on it right now, but as you can see, it's got a single captive thumb screw, and then it's got a ball nubbins on there to attach it to the side. In fact, I need to get my screwdriver because this has a lot of accessibility, if you will, to the way that you can build in it. No insulation material on here, no sound deadening material, which isn't really gonna change a whole lot when it comes to sound in your system. A lot of case manufacturers like to really load it up, and all it really ends up doing is making it heavier without really changing any of the sounds. I kind of wish they had gone with white cables here. They do exist, the white USB 3.0, the white USB-C, because it just would have looked nicer as you're kind of cable routing it. But you can see up here, the 216 has a built-in RGB controller / fan hub. This is nice because it kind of allows you to have a singular point to connect your fans and your lighting, especially if you're using other Lee products. They're gonna allow you to be able to keep all your wiring mess on the back side without having to wire in extra controllers and stuff, which means a tidier build on the business end. So speaking of the business end, you can see in here, it's just a big open layout. And because the motherboard tray is flat, it's a flat plane, means that it will support eATX motherboards, which is kind of becoming more and more normal these days, especially with your big motherboards with big VRMs, big coolers, 4 slots for RAM. They're not quite eATX, but they're definitely wider than a standard ATX. But if you look at the motherboard tray on the 205 mesh, you'll notice it's eATX wide, and then it's got this kind of a pop out, sort of a ridge that comes up, and then the cables come through that. So that doesn't allow you to go with any sort of wide motherboard. But now you have all this width right here for a wide motherboard, and you still have all the pass-through grommets over here. Plenty of room still for a front AIO or even a custom loop if you wanted. So you can see right here too on the, I guess we'd call this the shroud, you do have some grillage here. So if you put your power supply in there, either fan intaking from the bottom or fan intaking from the main component of the chassis, you're gonna have proper adequate airflow. You can also mount SSDs to this if you want. You got your mount holes right there. And technically it even has what appears to be fan mounts. So if you wanted to put fans on this side of it, pulling air through, you could do that. So you could create this sort of an updraft if you wanted. Intakes on the front, intakes on the bottom, because you do even have intake grills on the bottom right here. This is specifically for your power supply. So if it's feeding air from the bottom, like I said, but then you can have it pulling air through the bottom, up through the mid plate, up through the chassis, and out the top. All right, so on the build side of the PC here, let's go and talk about storage. So you can mount it's not even in there properly. Whenever they put that in together, that wasn't even tabbed in at the bottom like it's supposed to be. And those are not captive. So, geez, see why captive would be nice? So you got these two tabs right here, they tab in there, and then you can screw it down. So I just want to kind of point out that they didn't install that right at the factory. But anyway, I digress. So you could fit 2.5-inch drive, 2.5-inch drive, or like an ARGB controller or a fan controller or something here. You could take them out entirely if you don't want to use it. Right here, we've got this cover that covers the back side of the motherboard tray. Theoretically, this is where you would have access to the backside of the CPU socket if you have to install a water block or bracketry for any sort of air cooler or AIO pump. These two screws, well, that screw are not a thumb screw, but you remove those, this comes out. Have a couple cable ties right here. You have this interesting sort of a spring channel that would allow you to run cables down through here, theoretically your 8-pin EPS or dual 8-pin EPS, depending on your CPU that you got. Already showed you up here, you have your ARGB controller. And it doesn't just have to work with the JST plug that you would find with you know, the Lee & Lee fans and whatnot. They have standard ARGB. The 3-pin that's horizontal has kind of been the adopted standard for motherboards and stuff. And you have multiple places where you can use those, and another fan header right here, and another one right here. So it does come with 3 pre-installed fans. The rear is a solid white fan. The front are RGB fans. And now that's what actually denotes this case as the RGB. However, there is an additional piece that you can add to this if you want. And this is the ARGB controller USB module. So you have a couple different controls on here. It adds 2 more USB 3.0. You have the fan hub, mode, and color. So mode is like the blinky effects and such, and then C is for color. And then this would be the edge lighting of the fans right here. And then this replaces, so this front panel just, it's toolless. It pops right off, gives you access to the fan filter and such, which is actually just the mesh. But then this actually installs right here. Like it replaces this piece right here. In fact, I can just do that for you right now. And you'd have to be running a kind of a specific fan set for this to work with. You know, obviously because of the fact that it's talking about rim lighting and blade lighting, but we can replace this piece right here. And do this bundle. So it adds a bit more cable to your case and another USB 3.0. A lot of headers for motherboards a lot of motherboards do at least have 2 headers now for USB 3.0, but just thought I'd point that out. So this can route in like right underneath the fan. Like that, this will go this way. So it is a snug fit, but there it goes. Put this back on. So I'm just showing you how quick and easy this actually is to install. I like the fact that this is separated. It's not cost that's gonna be added to the case, because this is about a $100 USD case, which gives you a lot of features technically for the price. So there you go. 2 more USB on the side, sort of facing you if it's a right side PC, because the window's on the left, which means easy access to the buttons. So you're not up here fumbling around trying to change your colors, but USB faces directly towards you, so if you have a USB headset or something, you can plug it in there, you can see the controls, and then when you put this back on, pretty seamless. The only downside to it, honestly, like I said, you're adding this much more wiring to it. Now, for additional hard drive storage, on the bottom here, you do have a sled that has 2, or a tray that has 2 sleds that can mount 2 3.5-inch drives, so like spinning hard drives, or 2 2.5-inch drives, or 8 2.5-inch drives if you like double-sided tape like I do, or you can put controllers on here, whatever. Now the nice thing about this, typically to get these off, you have to flip the case upside down, undo some screws to pull it out. Not this one. This one is just a tab, and it's just a locking mechanism with this tab. And you do have multiple positions here, as you can see. You have sort of a left and a right. So there's 2 positions. If you don't use these, I pretty much take these out of every single build that I do, because I would much rather have the space. This gives you now all this space down here to cable manage your stuff. Even gives you some areas that you could technically tape down some cable tie hold downs. And then you have plenty of room now for all your cables and your power supply. And if you look at it from the front side, you can see they're not gonna really show. Now this is, right here, this is fully mesh. So this is another place where you'd be able to pull in air. So in the beginning of this video, when I said if you put a fan facing up on this side, blowing up towards your graphics card, which would be nice, cool air, it will be feeding it not only from the bottom, you know, the power supply is gonna be taking up most of that space anyway, it will pull in entirely through right here. And then you can just pop this off, which is working as your dust filter and your mesh intake. I like when companies just go, let's find the right balance of mesh density so that we don't have to put a filter behind it blocking even more airflow, but the holes aren't so big that dust just flows right through it. So this is actually a kind of a middle ground so that it provides filtration and airflow at the same time. But as you can see, look at how much of this is open space right here. So if you did have any sort of lighting on your power supply, or you have like a Thor power supply like we have on our test rig that shows you actual system wattage from the wall, you'd be able to see all that, at least through the mesh. So there's another test that we have to perform here in a second. And that is, oh, actually before we do that, I need to show you the top. Because when it comes to installing AIOs and stuff, it's often a pain in the butt to install it outside the chassis. So there's a screw here and a screw here. By undoing those 2 screws, you can now take this out. Now check this out. It's got these built-in kind of a cable routing / hold down tabs, but these are also removable. So if you decide you don't need these, you just want these to be open so you can put the wires right through there, you can do that. Now there is a gap small enough to allow you to run like fan cables through there. But if you decide you want more open space because you have more cables for whatever reason, just undo these 2 screws per tab, those come off, and then this will be the full opening. But this will allow you to take the bracket out, install it onto your AIO, and then when you're ready to put the whole thing in, you can attach it to your motherboard, right? Have it kind of sitting out here, and then when you're done, just take it, put it in there, and then off you go. So nice, simple, easy design. So the front fans are 160 millimeters, which are really interesting. They're odd size. The rear is a 140, the front are 160s, which is, it's not the, like, it's not a very common size. You can buy them, but if you want to mount a front radiator, there's some bracketry here that you have to sort of move. And I'm gonna show you how this works real quick, which I think is really kind of innovative. It doesn't, I like the way they designed this. So, it's the downside about putting that front thing in there is now it's holding onto the fan because of the way that I have the cable routed. These are the kinds of things that you learn as you build or start to mock up in a case. So you see this, these are just brackets. 1 bracket there and 1 bracket there that mounts into the fan. So if you want to use a 360 or you want to use a 280 or 140 millimeter fans or whatever, you just attach them to your fan, right? And it'll pull them in depending on, like, obviously if you went from 160 to 140, it would pull them in a little bit. Or if you went to 120s, it'd pull them in even more. And if you look on the front of the chassis right there, it's got pre-drilled holes that are threaded to fit with the widths of those particular fans. I think, realistically, I would probably leave these fans in here, and then I would go with maybe like the AIO mounted to the top, because there's so much fresh air that's gonna make its way in here. With these particular fans being 160s means more CFM but less noise, and less RPM to do it. And they're pretty good fans when it comes to the blade count, blade pitch, and shape to overcome the amount of mesh that's in the front of it, but still give you a ton of airflow, leading to, again, modern componentry uses a crap ton of power, which means cooling is extremely important. I think, personally, I would just leave these because they're already tied into the case. So it's one of those like, why change it kind of a deal? But then again, you know, if you're like me, you probably like to really tinker with stuff and make it your own anyway. But this is a lot this is a lot that comes in a $100 case. So I personally would just leave it because it's part of what you're paying for, so why change that out? But the last thing we need to test here is like we showed with the 205, you are not fitting a 4090 Strix in there. Will this fit a 4090 Strix? Dude, if they had a white one, that would look really sick. But that, you know what though? It might even fit a rat in there in between, barely, but it might. It'd be a tight fit. You'd have to have the fans on this side and the rat on this side, but that's the way it's designed to go. But check that out. I love when cases are filled up with components. It's one of the things I love most about water cooling, is just sort of filled it up. But all you gotta do now is just throw a 4090 or heck, even a 4080 in there. It's the exact same size. So if you're finding yourself in the position of going, man, I bought myself a 4090 or even a 4080, and you're like, it won't fit in my case, like we showed with the 205. It is not fit at all. For $100, you get a case that allows EATX, AIO, or open loop water cooling, plenty of ventilation, easy access to everything, modular design where you can add RGB controller to it, or plenty of space to have a long power supply, because that's the other thing, you might be having a big power supply with a power draw of current components, plenty of cable management, plenty of drive expansion. I mean, how many more check boxes do you have to tick on a $100 case to get this level of modularity and component fitment capability? All right, guys, there you go. Sound off down below. I know there's already been reviews out on this. We're a little late to the party. It seems like overall it's pretty well received. So I'm curious, has anyone bought one and built in it yet? Sound off down below, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll put a link to where you guys can find it down in the description. See you guys in the next one.